The desert wind blew hot across the Gobi, carrying sand that stung exposed skin and made every breath feel like swallowing glass. Dae-hyun wiped sweat from his forehead and stared at the screen of his geological scanner. The readings made no sense. Metal. Lots of it buried deep beneath 50 meters of sand and rock, but not iron or copper or any natural deposit. This was something else entirely. Hee-jin, you need to see this, he called out to his colleague. The archaeologist climbed down from the excavation grid, where her team had been carefully, brushing away sand from what they thought were ancient pottery fragments. She was covered in dust, her dark hair tied back in a practical ponytail, frustration evident on her face. They had been at this dig site for 3 months and found almost nothing of value. What is it now, Dae-hyun? Another false reading? Her tone was sharp but not unkind. They had been friends since university. He handed her the scanner. Look at the depth. Look at the composition. This is not natural. Hee-jin studied the screen, her expression changing from irritation to confusion, then to something else. Wonder, perhaps, or fear. This has to be a mistake. There is nothing down there. This region has been surveyed a dozen times. Run the ground-penetrating radar, Dae-hyun said quietly. Please. She looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. Within an hour, the entire team had gathered around the radar display. The image that appeared on the screen made everyone fall silent. Deep beneath the sand lay something massive, something with clean geometric lines and impossible dimensions. It was roughly 3 kilometers long, shaped like a blade or an arrow, buried perfectly horizontal as if placed there deliberately. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur. More equipment arrived. Government officials flew in from Beijing, Moscow, and Washington. The dig site transformed into a fortified camp with armed guards and restricted zones. But the scientists kept digging, kept uncovering, and what they found defied explanation. The hull of whatever lay beneath was made of a dark alloy that did not appear in any database. It did not rust, did not degrade, and seemed to absorb scanner signals in strange ways. The dating technology, when it finally gave a reading, showed an age that made the lead archaeologist physically stumble. 200,000 years. Minimum. Dae-hyun stood at the edge of the excavation pit as massive cranes lowered workers in protective harnesses down to the exposed surface of the structure. It gleamed dully under the floodlights, smooth and unblemished despite the countless centuries buried beneath sand and stone. He felt small looking at it, insignificant in a way he had never experienced before. It is a ship, Hee-jin said beside him. She had not left the site in days, barely eating or sleeping. It has to be. But who could have built this, when? The real question, Dae-hyun replied, is why it is here. The breakthrough came on a Tuesday. A young engineer named Tai-min was examining what appeared to be a seam or panel near what they theorized was the ship's entrance. He had placed his hand on the surface measuring temperature differences when the panel suddenly glowed, not brightly but with a soft blue light that pulsed like a heartbeat. Everyone froze. Security personnel raised their weapons. Scientists shouted contradictory orders, and then the ship hummed. It was a deep sound, felt more than heard, vibrating through the ground and into their bones. All across the exposed sections of the hull, lights began to activate. Blue turned to white, then to a warm amber color that seemed almost welcoming. The panel Tai-min had touched split open with a hiss of equalizing pressure. Behind it lay a corridor, dark but clean, with walls that seemed to glow faintly with their own internal light. The air that flowed out was cool and dry, smelling of nothing at all. No decay, no age, no dust, just emptiness. Nobody goes in, the head of security barked. Not until we have proper protocols. But Hee-jin was already moving. She grabbed a flashlight and stepped through the opening before anyone could stop her. Dae-hyun cursed and followed, refusing to let her face whatever was inside alone. Behind them, a dozen others pushed forward, security and scientists alike unable to resist the pull of the unknown. The interior of the ship was pristine. The corridor stretched ahead, curving gently upward, walls smooth and unmarked. Their footsteps echoed strangely, as if the space was both larger and smaller than it appeared. Emergency lighting strips along the floor activated as they walked, creating a path of light leading deeper into the vessel. They passed through several chambers, what looked like storage areas, filled with containers made of the same mysterious alloy. A large room with strange chairs or stations, too big for normal humans but not impossibly so. And then they found the chamber that would change everything. It was vast, easily the size of an aircraft hangar, and it was filled with thousands of pods. Each one was roughly human-sized, made of a clear crystalline material that had clouded with age. They stood in neat rows, stretching back into the darkness beyond the reach of their lights. And every single pod was open, its occupant long gone. What were they? Someone whispered. Heejin approached the nearest pod, examining it carefully. Inside was a shallow depression shaped for a body. But there were no remains, no indication of what had lain there. Just emptiness and a faint residue that might have been biological material once, now degraded beyond recognition. Daehyun moved to a central platform in the chamber. It looked different from the pods, more like a control station or terminal. The surface was smooth but marked with symbols that hurt to look at. Geometric patterns that seemed to shift and change when viewed from different angles. He reached out, hesitated, then placed his palm flat against the surface. The reaction was immediate. The entire chamber blazed with light. Holographic displays erupted into existence all around them, showing star charts and diagrams and streams of data in languages no human had ever seen. And in the center of it all, floating above the platform, a message began to play. The figure that appeared was humanoid but clearly not human. Taller, with features that were both familiar and alien, wearing clothing that looked more like living metal than fabric. It spoke, and though the language was unknown, there was something about the rhythm and cadence that felt almost recognizable. Then the ship's computer activated fully, and a mechanical voice began translating. The words that followed would change humanity forever. If you are seeing this, then you have reached the threshold. You have survived. You have grown. And now, you must know the truth about what you are and what is coming for you. 20 years had passed since the first sanctuary ship was discovered in the Gobi Desert. Daehyun stood on a viewing platform in Seoul, looking out at a city transformed beyond recognition. Buildings grew from living materials, their walls breathing and adapting to the environment. The Han River flowed crystal clear, cleaned by biological filters developed from progenitor technology. The air was pure, the energy clean, and poverty had become a historical footnote. He was older now, gray streaking his hair, lines around his eyes from 2 decades of intense work. But he was alive to see what humanity had become. That alone was worth every sacrifice. Still amazed after all these years? Heejin approached from behind. She was an admiral now, wearing the uniform of the Earth Space Command, the unified military force that protected humanity's interests both on the planet and beyond. Every day, Daehyun admitted, sometimes I still cannot believe this is real, that we actually did it. Earth had transformed into something the people of the early 21st century would have called paradise. The technology from the 12 sanctuary ships had revolutionized every aspect of human existence. Disease was essentially eliminated. Aging could be slowed or even reversed. Food and energy were abundant. People worked because they wanted to, pursuing passions and interests rather than struggling to survive. But humanity had not become complacent. The threat of the devourers hung over everything like a shadow. Every advancement, every innovation was evaluated not just for its benefit to daily life, but for its potential use in the coming war. Are we ready? Daehyun asked quietly. Heejin looked up at the sky, where dozens of orbital structures were visible even in daylight. Construction yards, weapons platforms, research stations, all part of humanity's defensive network. We are more ready than the progenitors ever were. But whether that is enough, we will only know when they arrive. The solar system had been transformed into a fortress. Mars now hosted a population of 50 million, its atmosphere being slowly terraformed. The asteroid belt had been mined and converted into raw materials for ship construction. Stations orbited every major planet, serving as early warning systems and defensive positions. But the real achievement was the fleet. In orbit around Earth and scattered throughout the system, thousands of ships represented humanity's response to the devourer threat. Not copies of progenitor vessels, but something new, a fusion of ancient knowledge and human innovation. The flagship Defiance hung in high orbit. It was massive, 5 kilometers long, built using technology from the sanctuary ships but designed with human creativity. Where the progenitors had favored elegant efficiency, humans had added redundancy and adaptability. Where ancient vessels had relied on pure energy weapons, human ships carried diverse armaments, conventional and exotic, ready to adapt to any threat. Hyun-woo was part of the crew, serving as the primary liaison with Guardian. The AI had distributed aspects of itself across the fleet, providing guidance and support. Over 20 years, Hyun-woo had become as much a philosopher as a linguist. His understanding of the progenitor worldview giving him insights others lacked. Guardian says the Devourers are predictable in their unpredictability. He explained during a final briefing before the fleet's deployment. They adapt to whatever opposes them, learning and evolving with each encounter. The progenitors lost because they fought the same way every time. We must be different. Jin-ho, now a general commanding ground forces, nodded. We have trained for asymmetric warfare, hit-and-run tactics, deception. The progenitors were warriors, but humans have been fighting each other for thousands of years. We know how to be unpredictable. The strategy was clear. Humanity would not wait for the Devourers to arrive. They would go out to meet the threat, establish forward bases, and build alliances with any other species they encountered. The galaxy was vast, and surely humanity was not the only inheritor of progenitor knowledge. The first wave of exploration and colonization ships had already departed. The pioneer's dream was one of hundreds, each carrying thousands of volunteers to establish humanity's presence on distant worlds. Some would become permanent colonies, others would serve as military outposts or research stations. Dae-hyun had volunteered for the pioneer's dream, along with thousands of others who wanted to be part of humanity's expansion into the stars. At his age, many thought he should retire, enjoy the peaceful Earth he had helped create. But he could not rest, not while the threat remained. The ship was enormous, easily the size of a city, containing everything needed to establish a thriving colony light years from Earth. Gardens and parks filled the interior. Schools and research facilities hummed with activity. Families had volunteered together, understanding that this was a one-way journey, at least for them. Their children might return someday, but they would live and die among the stars. On the day of departure, Dae-hyun stood in the observation deck, watching Earth shrink behind them. The planet was a blue and white marble, beautiful and fragile, containing billions of souls who trusted that those leaving would help protect them. Guardian's avatar appeared beside him. The AI had evolved over 20 years, becoming more than just a repository of progenitor knowledge. It had learned from humanity, adapted to their ways of thinking, become something new. I have watched many species reach this point, Guardian said quietly. Most failed long before now. They destroyed themselves with the technology I gave them, or they refused to change and died when the Devourers arrived. But you humans, you did something unprecedented. What was that? Dae-hyun asked. You improved on what you inherited. The progenitors were brilliant, but they were also rigid. They built perfect systems and could not imagine better ones. But humans, you took what we gave you and made it better. Your ships are more adaptable than ours. Your weapons more creative. Your strategies more unpredictable. You have innovations the progenitors never conceived. The avatar turned to look at Dae-hyun directly. I was programmed to preserve progenitor knowledge and guide lesser species. But I have learned that you are not lesser. Different, yes. Younger, certainly. But not inferior. When the Devourers arrive, they will expect to face another version of what they have already defeated. Instead, they will find humanity. And humanity does not surrender. Dae-hyun felt pride swell in his chest. 20 years ago, he had been a simple geologist content to study rocks and ancient history. Now he was part of something greater than he could have imagined. Part of a species that had looked into the darkness of space and decided to be the light. The pioneer's dream continued its journey, one ship among hundreds spreading across the galaxy. Behind them, Earth prepared for war. Ahead, the unknown waited with both danger and opportunity. Hyun-woo joined Dae-hyun at the observation window. Do you think we will win? I think we will fight, Dae-hyun replied. The progenitors were powerful, but they forgot how to struggle. They had eliminated every challenge, every hardship. When the Devourers came, they did not know how to adapt. But we humans, we have been struggling since we climbed down from the trees. We know how to survive when everything seems impossible. The ship's faster-than-light drive activated, and the stars stretched into lines. They were heading for a world the progenitors had marked as promising, a planet where they could establish humanity's first true interstellar colony, and a forward base for the coming war. Somewhere far ahead in space and time, The Devourers continued their slow consumption of galaxies. They had destroyed the progenitors and countless other civilizations. They had never been stopped, never been defeated, never even significantly delayed, but they had never faced humanity. They had never encountered a species that could take the achievements of those who came before and build something better. They had never fought beings who could look at impossible odds and simply refuse to accept them. The war would come eventually. Maybe in a century, maybe in 2. But when it did, the Devourers would learn what the universe had forgotten. That humanity's greatest strength was not their technology or their intelligence. It was their stubborn refusal to give up, their ability to adapt and overcome, their willingness to stand together against the darkness. Daehyun watched the stars rush past and smiled. Whatever came next, humanity would face it the way they had faced every challenge in their history, not with perfection or superior force, but with creativity, determination, and the absolute refusal to surrender. The future was uncertain. The enemy was terrifying. The odds were against them, but humanity had never let that stop them before, and they were not about to start now. The first month was chaos. Nations that had been enemies for generations were suddenly forced to sit at the same table and cooperate. The Unity Council, formed from representatives of every country and major organization, met in a specially built facility near the original sanctuary ship. Arguments were fierce and frequent. Trust was in short supply, but Guardian was patient and strict. When delegates tried to claim superior positions or demand special treatment, the AI would simply shut down access to the technology until they behaved more reasonably. It was like being scolded by a teacher who was also an all-powerful alien intelligence, humbling and effective. Hae Jin had been elected to the council as the scientific representative. She sat through 16-hour meetings, negotiating treaties and agreements that would have taken decades under normal circumstances. The pressure was immense, but she refused to break. Every night she would return to the research facility exhausted and tell Daehyun about the small victories won. Brazil and Argentina agreed to share research from the sanctuary ship in the Amazon, she said one evening. Japan and Korea are coordinating their efforts for the first time in living memory. It is slow, but we are making progress. Is it enough? Daehyun asked. I do not know. Guardian does not tell us how we are being judged. We just have to do our best and hope. The second month brought tangible changes. Guardian began releasing basic technology from the sanctuary ships. Not weapons or advanced systems, but practical innovations. Clean energy generators that could power cities without pollution. Medical treatments that could cure diseases humanity had struggled with for centuries. Agricultural techniques that could grow food in deserts and mountains. The impact was immediate and dramatic. Energy companies that had controlled global economies found their business models obsolete overnight. Pharmaceutical corporations watched as miracle cures became freely available. Agricultural industries had to completely restructure. It was disruptive and painful, but necessary. Hyun-woo led the team responsible for translating and distributing the technical information. He worked with experts from dozens of countries, ensuring that the knowledge spread evenly rather than concentrating in the hands of the powerful. The progenitors understood something we forgot, he explained to a global broadcast. Technology without wisdom is just another form of weapon. They built their gifts to be accessible to everyone because they knew that hoarding knowledge is what destroys civilizations. But not everyone welcomed the changes. The third month saw a rise in resistance movements. People who had profited from the old systems fought back. Sabotage at research facilities, attacks on Unity Council members, propaganda campaigns claiming the sanctuary technology was corrupting humanity's soul. Jin-ho found himself coordinating security across multiple sites. The attacks were becoming more sophisticated and more dangerous. One night, explosives were discovered near the Antarctic sanctuary ship. Another time, a computer virus almost corrupted the shared research database. They are afraid, Jin-ho told Daehyun after stopping another attack. Change is always frightening, but this is too fast for many people. Their entire understanding of the world is being destroyed. We do not have the luxury of going slowly, Daehyun replied. The Devourers will not wait for humanity to feel comfortable with change. The turning point came in the fourth month. A massive earthquake struck Indonesia, one of the worst natural disasters in recorded history. Millions were at risk. The old world would have seen nations pledging aid while actually providing minimal help. But this time was different. Guardian opened access to emergency technology, medical ships from the sanctuary vessels, capable of healing injuries that would have been fatal, construction systems that could rebuild entire cities in days, food production units that could feed millions without supply chains. And humanity responded. Not just governments, but ordinary people. Volunteers from every country poured into the disaster zone. Scientists worked around the clock. The Unity Council coordinated the largest relief effort in history. Within a week, what should have been a catastrophe had been transformed into a demonstration of what humanity could achieve when working together. Dae-hyun was part of the relief team, helping to set up medical facilities. He worked alongside people from nations that had been enemies, spoke languages translated in real time by progenitor technology, and watched as suffering was alleviated with tools that seemed like magic. One night, as he helped carry an injured child to a healing pod, he realized he was crying, not from sadness but from hope. For the first time since the discovery, he believed humanity might actually succeed. The 5th month saw accelerated progress. Guardian began releasing more advanced technology, transportation systems that could move people across continents in minutes, communication networks that could connect minds directly without words, educational tools that could teach complex subjects in hours rather than years. But there were growing pains. Economic systems that had existed for centuries collapsed. Millions of jobs became obsolete. Society had to restructure itself almost completely. Some adapted easily, excited by the possibilities. Others struggled, lost in a world that no longer made sense to them. The Unity Council worked to manage the transition. Universal basic income funded by energy abundance, retraining programs using progenitor educational technology, communities reorganized around new principles of cooperation and shared resources. It was messy and imperfect, but it was happening. Heejin presented regular reports to Guardian, showing the progress humanity had made. The AI listened but never indicated whether it was sufficient. The uncertainty was maddening. As the 6th month approached, tension grew. What would Guardian decide? Had humanity changed enough? There were still conflicts, still divisions, still problems. But there was also genuine effort, real growth, and a level of cooperation that would have seemed impossible 6 months earlier. On the final day of the deadline, the Unity Council gathered at the original excavation site. Representatives from every nation stood together, waiting for judgment. Guardian's holographic avatar appeared before them, and for a long moment the AI said nothing. Then it spoke. "You have surprised me. In 6 months you have achieved what most species cannot manage in generations. You are not perfect. You still have divisions and conflicts, but you have shown the capacity for growth, for change, for unity in the face of impossible challenges." Relief swept through the assembled crowd. People embraced, some crying, others cheering. "Therefore," Guardian continued, "I will unlock the full database of all 12 sanctuary ships. You will have access to everything the progenitors knew, faster than light travel, advanced weapons, genetic engineering, artificial intelligence beyond anything you currently imagine. And most importantly, their mistakes and the lessons they learned too late." The hologram shifted, showing images of vast fleets and advanced cities. "But remember this, technology alone will not save you. The progenitors had everything you are about to receive, and they still fell. Your strength is not in the tools I give you, but in your ability to adapt, to cooperate, to create solutions the progenitors never imagined." Guardian's avatar began to fade. "The Devourers are coming. You have perhaps 180 years to prepare. Use them wisely, and know that I will be watching, helping where I can, but the future belongs to you now. Make it worth the sacrifice your ancestors made to give you this chance." The world changed overnight. The revelation about the sanctuary ships and the Devourers could not be kept secret for long. Within a week, leaked footage from the auditorium had spread across every corner of the internet. Government scrambled to control the narrative, but it was too late. Humanity knew the truth. Reaction was mixed and violent. Some saw it as proof of divine intervention, others as the ultimate existential threat. Religious institutions debated whether the progenitors were angels or demons. Scientists argued over the validity of the evidence. Politicians saw opportunity and danger in equal measure. And everywhere people were afraid. Daehyun watched news broadcasts from around the world in the research facility's common area. Riots in major cities, emergency sessions of parliaments and congresses, military forces mobilizing for unclear purposes. The unity that Guardian had spoken of as necessary seemed impossibly distant. "They are going to destroy everything," Hyojin said, sitting beside him. Her optimism had faded over the past days, replaced by a grim realism. "Countries are already positioning to control the sanctuary ships. There has been fighting near the one discovered in Antarctica. Russia and China are arguing over the one in the Himalayas." Guardian warned this might happen, Yanwu added. He looked exhausted, having spent the last 72 hours trying to extract more information from the ship's computer. "The AI says it has seen this pattern before with other species. They discover the truth, they panic, they fight over the scraps, and they destroy themselves before the real threat even arrives." Daehyun turned off the television. "Then we have to find a way to prevent that." But preventing global chaos proved harder than understanding alien technology. Within a month of the revelation, 3 separate factions had emerged. The Unity Coalition, led by scientists and progressive politicians, advocated for international cooperation and equal access to the sanctuary technology. The Sovereignty Alliance, composed of nationalist governments and military forces, insisted that each nation should control the ships found within their territory. And then there were the rejectors, religious extremists and conspiracy theorists who wanted the ships destroyed, viewing them as threats to humanity's soul. The crisis came to a head when military forces from the Sovereignty Alliance attempted to seize control of the original dig site. They arrived at dawn, 300 soldiers with heavy weapons and armored vehicles. Their orders were clear: secure the sanctuary ship, remove all foreign personnel, and establish exclusive control. Jin Ho, who had been assigned as head of security for the scientific team, watched them approach through binoculars. He was former special forces experienced in combat, but this was different. These were not enemies but fellow humans, soldiers following orders from their governments. "We cannot fight them," he said to Daehyun. "We have maybe 30 security personnel. They have 10 times that number and superior firepower. We do not need to fight them," Daehyun replied, though his heart was racing. "Guardian, are you monitoring this?" The ship's AI responded through speakers throughout the facility. Its voice had evolved over the weeks, sounding less mechanical and more organic. "I am aware of the approaching force. They intend to seize control through violence. This is unacceptable. Can you stop them without killing anyone?" Hyojin asked. "I can, but doing so will reveal capabilities I have kept hidden. Once shown, there will be no returning to your previous understanding of what is possible." Daehyun looked at his colleagues, at the scientists and researchers who had become like family over these intense months. "We do not have a choice. Do it." The attacking force reached the perimeter just as the sun broke over the horizon. Their commander, a stern general who believed he was securing his nation's future, gave the order to advance. And then the ship responded. The sand around the excavation site began to move, rippling like water. Pillars of crystalline material erupted from the ground, forming a barrier that looked like ice but was harder than diamond. The soldiers opened fire, but their bullets ricocheted harmlessly away. They brought forward heavier weapons, rocket launchers, and explosives, but these too had no effect. Then the ship's defensive systems activated fully. Beams of soft blue light swept across the attacking force. Where the light touched, weapons simply stopped working. Electronics died. Engines shut down. Even the simple mechanics of guns ceased to function. Within minutes, 300 soldiers stood confused and powerless, their advanced military equipment reduced to useless metal and plastic. But Guardian did not harm them. No one was injured, no one killed. The AI simply made it impossible for them to continue their attack. The general, now standing in the desert with nothing but his voice, shouted demands and threats. Guardian responded by projecting its holographic avatar, the same progenitor figure from the message. Before the entire force, "Violence will not grant you what you seek," the hologram said, Guardian's voice coming from it. "The progenitors left safeguards precisely for this situation. I cannot allow the technology within these ships to fall into hands that would use it for conquest or division. Humanity must prove itself worthy before I will share the full knowledge." "Who are you to judge us?" the general demanded. "I am the guardian left by your ancestors. I have watched 1,000 species face this choice. Most failed. They turned on each other, fought over the gifts left for them, and destroyed themselves. I will not allow that to happen again. Not if I can prevent it. The incident was broadcast live across the world. Billions watched as the ancient AI lectured human forces on their own failings. The reaction was explosive. Some nations threatened nuclear retaliation. Others called for the destruction of all sanctuary ships. But slowly, voices of reason began to emerge. Scientists published papers explaining that fighting over the technology would indeed be suicidal. Religious leaders called for peace and contemplation. Citizens took to the streets not in riots but in protest demanding cooperation. Young people especially, those who would have to live with the consequences, organized movements pushing for global unity. Guardian made its position clear in a message broadcast to every screen, every phone, every device on the planet. I will give humanity 6 months to demonstrate progress toward unity. You need not achieve perfection. You need not solve every conflict or bridge every divide, but you must show genuine effort, real growth, and the capacity to work together despite your differences. If you cannot, then I will shut down all sanctuary ships and let you face the devourers with only what you have built yourselves. The ultimatum was clear and terrifying. 6 months to change the fundamental nature of human civilization, or lose any chance of survival against an intergalactic threat. Dae-hyun stood outside the ship that night, looking up at stars that seemed less friendly now. Somewhere out there, the devourers were coming. 200 years might sound like a long time, but to prepare a civilization, to build defenses, to transform humanity into something capable of facing such a threat, it was barely enough. Do you think we can do it? Hyojin asked beside him. I do not know, he admitted, but I think Guardian is right. If we cannot unite now, knowing what is coming, then we deserve what happens to us. The question is whether knowing that is enough to make us change. Around them, the work continued. Scientists studying progenitor technology, diplomats trying to forge agreements between rival nations, ordinary people trying to understand their place in a universe far larger and more dangerous than they had ever imagined. The 6-month countdown had begun, and the whole world was watching. The excavation site had transformed into something between a military base and a research facility. Tents and temporary buildings sprawled across the desert, housing scientists from 40 different nations. Security was tight. Armed personnel patrolled the perimeter day and night. Satellites watched from orbit. The world knew something significant had been found, but the full truth remained classified at the highest levels. Hyunwoo arrived 6 days after the ship activated. He was a linguist and cryptographer, specializing in dead languages and pattern recognition. When he first saw the symbols covering the ship's interior, he stood motionless for nearly an hour, just staring. His team thought he had gone into shock, but Hyunwoo was seeing patterns, connections that others missed. This is not random, he said finally, pointing at a sequence of markings along a wall. These symbols repeat. They follow grammatical structures. This is language, complex language, and there are elements here that remind me of ancient Sanskrit, Proto-Indo-European, even traces of old Korean grammatical patterns. But that is impossible. Dae-hyun, who had barely slept since the discovery, joined him. Why impossible? What if our languages came from them? Them? Hyunwoo turned to face him. Who are them? We have found no bodies, no indication of who built this. Hyejin approached, carrying a tablet displaying the holographic message they had recorded. Then maybe we should focus on what they left behind. The computer is still active. It has been translating slowly, learning our languages by accessing our wireless networks. It is getting better at communication every day. They had established a secure connection to the ship's systems, though calling it a connection felt inadequate. The ship's computer was not like any artificial intelligence humanity had created. It was vast, complex, and it seemed to understand context and emotion in ways that should not be possible for a machine. Over the following weeks, Hyunwoo led a team working around the clock to decode the message. The ship's computer helped, but it was cautious, revealing information slowly as if testing whether humanity was ready to receive it. The breakthrough came when Hyunwoo realized the symbols were not just language but also mathematical formulas and genetic codes, all layered into the same script. They encoded multiple types of information into a single writing system, he explained to the assembled research team. Language, science, history, all in one. It is brilliant and terrifying. The complexity suggests a civilization far beyond our current level. The day they successfully decoded the full message, Representatives from the United Nations, major governments, and scientific institutions gathered in a specially constructed auditorium near the ship. Security was absolute. What they were about to learn could not be allowed to leak uncontrolled. The holographic figure appeared again, now rendered with perfect clarity. The being stood before them, tall and dignified, and when it spoke, the ship's computer translated in real time. "We are the progenitors. If you have found this message, then you are our children, separated by millions of years and countless generations. We seeded your world with life as we seeded thousands of others across this galaxy. This was not conquest or experimentation. This was survival." The auditorium remained absolutely silent. Dae-hyun felt Hee-jin grip his hand tightly. This was beyond anything they had imagined. The hologram continued. "Our civilization spanned galaxies. We had achieved what you would call perfection. No disease, no poverty, no war. We had conquered death itself and spread life to barren worlds. But we made a mistake. We drew attention." The image shifted, showing star maps and distant galaxies. "From beyond the cosmic void they came. We call them the Devourers. They are not biological or mechanical in any way you understand. They are hunger given form, darkness that consumes light, entropy made conscious. They feed on life, on energy, on the fundamental forces that hold reality together." The display showed worlds dying, stars going dark, entire sections of galaxies withering into nothingness. The scale was incomprehensible, horrifying. "We fought. For 10,000 years, we waged war across multiple galaxies. We created weapons that could destroy solar systems, ships that could manipulate space and time, soldiers who were more machine than biological. And we lost. Slowly, inevitably, we lost." The holographic progenitor seemed to age before their eyes, weariness evident in every line of its form. "In our final centuries, we made a choice. We could not save ourselves, but perhaps we could save something. We created the sanctuary ships, vessels designed to hide, to wait, to preserve knowledge and genetic material until it could be useful again." The image changed to show ships like the one they had discovered, hundreds of them scattering across the galaxy. Each ship was sent to a seeded world. Each carried different knowledge, different technologies. They were programmed to remain hidden until the native species reached a certain level of development, not advanced enough to misuse what we left behind, but capable enough to understand the danger and prepare for it. Dae-hyun felt cold despite the desert heat outside. "Prepare for what?" he whispered. As if answering him, the hologram spoke again. "The Devourers move slowly on cosmic scales. They consume one galaxy before moving to the next. They have been feeding on our former territory for millions of years, but they will not stop. Eventually, inevitably, they will come here. Our calculations made before we fell predicted they would reach this galaxy in approximately 200 years from the time this message is received." Panic rippled through the auditorium. 200 years sounded like a long time, but for a civilization to prepare for an intergalactic threat, it was nothing. An eye blink. "You must understand," the progenitor continued. "We do not leave you this knowledge as a curse but as a gift. You have time. You have the tools. Everything we learned, every technology we created, every mistake we made, it is all here in the sanctuary ships. 12 of them on your world, each containing different aspects of our knowledge." The hologram began to fade. "You are not us. You evolved differently, thought differently. Perhaps you will succeed where we failed. The ship's guardian intelligence will help you, but only if you prove worthy. Unity, wisdom, and the will to survive are required. Without these, our technology will only hasten your end. Choose wisely, children of Earth. Choose quickly. Time is short and the darkness is patient." The image vanished. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Then chaos erupted. People shouting, demanding answers, making claims, issuing orders. But Dae-hyun only stared at where the hologram had been, his mind racing. Hee-jin leaned close to him. "What do we do?" "We learn," he said quietly. "We prepare. And we hope that humanity can become what we need to be before it is too late." The ship's computer, which they had begun calling Guardian, activated displays showing the locations of the other 11 sanctuary ships. They were hidden across the planet, buried in ice, submerged in ocean trenches, concealed in mountain ranges, each one waiting to share its secrets with a species that had just learned it was never alone in the universe, and that something ancient and terrible was coming to devour everything they had ever known.